Since I'm not really familiar with speaking in English in front of an audience, and I didn't get the chance to grab some CBD before the presentation, I'll use my paper notes. Sorry. So presentation was there. I work with a great team from both Université de Montréal and Université de Sherbrooke. So let's start. We don't have any conflict of interest to disclose. So a little bit of background. According to the 2015 WHO World Drug Report, an estimated 17 million people worldwide use cocaine in 2013, which represent 0.4% of the population segment aged 15 to 64. In North America, cocaine is the second most illicit substance after cannabis, with annual prevalence rates of 2.2% in the US and 1.3% in Canada. The use of cocaine has been linked in previous studies to various health problems, including increased risk of HIV and Hep C infections, but many more medical and psychosocial problems. So, cocaine binge is not well studied. Very few studies actually have directly looked at correlates and consequences of cocaine binging in humans. There was only one study conducted in Houston, Texas, that was published in 2009 that found that recent crack binging was not only frequent with more than 50% of the participants, but associated with poorer social status and risky sexual behaviors. On the other hand, a greater number of studies have looked at adverse health outcomes related to other types of binge drug use, such as binge of any drug or binge of injection drug or stimulant drug binging. In these studies, binge drug use was defined by characteristics similar to the type of binge drug use observed in cocaine users: loss of control, inability to stop using until there is no drug or until they can physically take it, as well as very frequent use in a time interval ranging between a few hours to a few days. These studies have shown that binge drug use is linked to an increased risk of injection material sharing, high-risk sexual behaviors, and acquisition of blood-borne viral infections. Previous research has also shown that co-occurring mental health disorders are frequent in people who use cocaine, particularly mood, anxiety, and antisocial personality disorder. Typically, these disorders represent more than a third of the samples. Several studies have shown an association between mental health disorders and risk behaviors for HIV and Hep C infection in people with substance use disorder, including cocaine. This association is particularly significant amongst those with antisocial personality disorder, more severe psychiatric illness, or in individuals suffering from anxiety. In a previous analysis of the Cosmo study, anxiety disorders and psychological distress, but not mood disorders, were associated with an increased risk of material sharing. And interestingly, other studies looking at binge use in methamphetamine users found significant association between mental health symptoms, including paranoia, hallucinations, and depression, and binge use. Those findings stress the need for a better understanding of the potential mechanism underlying the association between mental health and risk for blood-borne viral infection. Some findings may indicate that binge use might be one of these mechanisms, and some preliminary analysis of the Cosmos study showed that cocaine binge tended to be more frequent in the group with severe psychological distress. However, to date, studies have not explored the possible interplay between mental health disorders and cocaine binge. So that's why we decided to study this in the Cosmos study. And recent studies are showing that some harm reduction strategies are, like needle exchange program, may be less efficient in North America or in population with more cocaine use disorder. So we were thinking of studying this topic because it could lead to strategies directed to this particular population. So hypothesis. The present analysis of the Cosmo study dataset aims to examine the association between cocaine binging and different psychiatric disorder, namely anxiety, mood, and antisocial personality disorder. Although individuals diagnosed with cocaine use disorder in general present impulse-reward cognitive dysfunction, these deficits might be more pronounced in those presenting psychiatric comorbidities because of the potential effect of both conditions on cognitions and behaviors. In light of previous studies, we suspected that selected participants with anxiety disorder and antisocial personality disorders were more likely to binge cocaine. So the Cosmo study is a prospective cohort study in Montreal with the intent of better understanding the associations between mental health markers and risk use behaviors in cocaine users. 605 individuals who injected or smoked cocaine within the last 30 days were recruited between October 2010 and April 2013, mainly through community-based addiction and harm reduction programs. Those participants were not currently undertaking a specific treatment for cocaine use disorders. The interviews were every 3 months for up to 6 interviews. And at baseline, the participant underwent a 90 minutes interview administered by a trained interviewer using a life history calendar and visual calendars to decrease the recall bias. The participant received $30 for each interview. So the cocaine binge in the month prior to the study recruitment was the outcome of interest in the study. It was defined as reporting at least one episode within the last month when the participant used a large amount of cocaine repetitively over a period of time until he had no drug or was physically unable to use more. This definition was based on the existing literature, but they also did focus groups with the cocaine users before they started the study to arrive with this definition. So the main explanatory variable in the study was the presence of psychiatric diagnosis. We used the CIDI, so the Composite International Diagnostic Interview for anxiety and mood disorders in the 12 months prior to the interview. And we used the DIS, so the Diagnostic Interview Schedule for DSM-4 for antisocial personality disorder. These two questionnaires, CIDI and DIS, were validated in a population with co-occurring substance use disorder in excess 1 and 2 psychiatric disorder. So the anxiety disorders included panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, and specific phobias. The mood disorders included depression, bipolar disorder, and dysthymia. The choice of the other explanatory variables was based on previous studies that examined cocaine or methamphetamine binge or intense use. And those variables were assessed as potential confounders of the association between cocaine binge and the psychiatric diagnosis. All the other characteristics were studied, like all the mood, the anxiety disorders were assessed at baseline, and all the characteristics also. And the antisocial personality disorder was assessed at a later interview because it was more stable in time and we didn't have enough time to do all at once at the first interview. So we used a Wall chi-square for the univariate analysis comparing all the covariates in the psychiatric diagnosis with recent cocaine binge. And we did logistic regressions with a purposeful selection procedure for the multivariate analysis. For multivariate analysis, we did them with the psychiatric, like we did logistic regression with each psychiatric diagnostics that reach a p-value of 0.2 or less in univariate analysis. We did the logistic regression. Okay. So a total of 492 participants completed all the questionnaires on psychiatric disorder and were therefore included in the present study. The selected participants were mainly similar to the Cosmo participants that were not included in the present analysis. They were mostly male, mean age of 40 years old, almost half of the sample completed high school, vast majority received welfare in the last 3 months. But but almost a third of the sample reporting also having a main source of income originating from marginal or criminal activity, which can be selling drugs or sex work. There were more participants with last month total income in the superior quartile in the binge group. And a high proportion of the participants had a period of homelessness in the last 3 months. That proportion was significantly greater in the coke and binge group. The majority had smoked cocaine during the last month, and that proportion was even greater in the coke and binge group, while about half of the total sample had injected it in both groups. Lastly, the severity of dependence was generally high, and even higher in the coke and binge group. So in the univariate analysis, well, we see firstly, we saw it also in the other slide, that almost a quarter of the participants had experienced one or more coke and binge in the month prior to study recruitment. And according to the CIDI, 45% met the criteria for an anxiety disorder within the last 12 months, compared to 28% for a mood disorder. Finally, 48% of the sample had a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, according to the DIS. In univariate analysis, the anxiety disorder and the antisocial personality disorder were significantly associated with coke and binge in the last month. So when we did the logistic regressions, the association between anxiety disorders and coke and binge did not remain significant after adjustment for the confounders. So the association was linked to the following covariates: being homeless, being in the highest last month income quartile, and having a high severity of dependence cocaine score. Conversely, the association between antisocial personality disorder and cocaine binge did remain significant. So lifetime antisocial personality disorder increased the odds of recent cocaine binge by 73%, even when controlling for the same potential confounders. Okay. Well, the exact mechanism that could explain the association between antisocial personality disorder and cocaine binging in our study is unknown. Specific cognitive patterns pertaining to this disorder may be potential candidates. High impulsivity, lack of self-control, and disturbed risk perception are common findings in those individuals. The study sample consisted of a large group of out-of-treatment cocaine users assessed for psychiatric diagnosis using validated standardized interviewer-driven questionnaires. We used a definition of cocaine binge in line with previous studies on drug binge, but that we also validated with local cocaine users. Although we use different techniques such as life history calendar and standardized well-validated psychiatric diagnosis tools, it is impossible to exclude a recall bias. And otherwise, like less than 15% of the study population were female cocaine users. Not surprising for out-of-treatment cocaine users, but it makes our findings more difficult to generalize to female cocaine user population. Also, we had to focus on a limited number of psychiatric diagnoses, mainly because of the time that was available to conduct the interview. Notably, borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder were not included in the analysis because we didn't get the chance to do those questionnaires because of the time. But they are common in cocaine users. Finally, the cross-sectional design of the study did not allow us to confirm causality between antisocial personality disorder and the main outcome. However, the fact that antisocial personality disorder is a long-lasting diagnosis, usually originating early in life, supports the hypothesized direction for this association. So to conclude, this is a first study, as I said earlier, looking at the association between some psychiatric disorders and cocaine binge. And it shows that participants with antisocial personality disorder are at increased odds of reporting recent cocaine binge, but not those with anxiety or mood disorders. Longitudinal studies, including other relevant psychiatric disorders, are needed to confirm this conclusion. Targeted interventions are needed in a population in which other harm reduction strategy might be less efficient. Our funding and future studies could help develop these interventions aiming at decreasing the risk for blood-borne virus infection and other negative outcomes in specifically addressing cocaine binge in individuals with antisocial personality disorder. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.